they go up, somebody's not using it, you just
Yes.
remind them.
Yes. Now, are they, how close do they got to be?
I mean, they need
Right after.
yeah, right. That would be the best way to do it.
Pick them up and they're on, and you run up here.
Yes. So you just have to take them out. Well, he'll be turning them on.
Thank you. Just make a motion that you
So much.
Yeah. I did not bring the right. I bet I have it here. I have it. It's a great tree. Oh, no. Always the faces. This is great. It's all good. What can go wrong? We are. Awesome. So is that cool? I was looking for you. Yeah, yeah. Is that cool? So I'm just going to I've kind of got the order. So make sure. Yep. If we're in the back and I do it in there. Okay. Last window. Okay. Just wave friends. Okay. We're scrolling up. Yeah, sure. I'm waiting. Where's Carol? All right, we are going to get started. Thank you all for being here. As I said, I am Eric Barnes. I am publisher of the Memphis Daily News, as well as our community papers in Nashville, Knoxville, and Chattanooga. But I am here today really as president of the Tennessee Press Association. We thank you all for being here, and we thank everyone who is watching this as it's being live streamed around the state and really anywhere. We are here at the Nashville Public Library, a beautiful place that I honestly had never been in, and it's a really fitting place for us to be as a group of journalists and people concerned about the future and the past of the state. Let me introduce Kent Oliver, who's the director of the Nashville Public Library.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Nashville Public Library. We are so pleased that we could co-sponsor this important event here at the library, and we'd like to thank the Tennessee Press Association for inviting us to be part of today. We're really thrilled about it. In 2017, the Nashville Public Library was named the Gale Library Journal Library of the Year that recognizes the best public library in North America. And we inspire reading, advance learning and education, and we connect community every day. And we believe that libraries are essential to help meeting the challenges that face not only Nashville, but Tennessee and the United States. Like all public libraries across Tennessee, we know that public libraries are a key institution in our democracy. We ensure that a better informed populace receives the information they need to make informed decisions. That information represents all points of view, is accessed freely, and regardless of a person's circumstances in our great country. We look forward to the spirited conversation today and the exchange of information. And again, we're so glad that you can be here, and good luck to our candidates. Thank you.
Before I bring out the candidates, let me thank real quickly our forum sponsors who helped to make this possible, both in their sponsorships and just their help and their participation and questions and getting you all here. That includes the ACLU of Tennessee, Bob and Gail Atkins, the Beacon Center of Tennessee, Enterprise Electric, the League of Women Voters of Tennessee, Nashville Public Library, of course, Think Tennessee, UT School of Journalism and Electronic Media, West Star Leadership Program, and XMI. And let me now bring out our candidates, if you would come. And yeah, you can sit, and we're not real formal today, so we've got an order. I did a blind drawing with the auditing firm of me, myself, and I, and this is the order that we'll have. A reminder to the candidates, when you speak, you'll need to pick up the microphone and hold it close. Although they can hear you, we are live streaming, so if you're not speaking in that microphone, like I just did, the people out there listening and watching won't be able to hear you. Yes? And I need to be a little closer to the microphone. That's Karl Daniels, our Executive Vice President, kind of sort of my boss. Let me introduce from your right to left, Republican Randy Boyd, Republican Bill Lee, Republican Kay White, Democrat Craig Fitzhugh, Democrat Karl Dean. We had also invited Beth Harwell, the Speaker of the House, who had hoped to be here but ended up not being able to. She did send a statement, which I'll read. I regret that I am unable to participate in this morning's forum, but the House of Representatives is in session. And as Speaker, it's my duty to preside over the proceedings. I applaud the Tennessee Press Association for hosting this forum, and I look forward to continuing to discuss the important issues facing our state and sharing my vision with your members over the next several months. Just the quick ground rules today, and then you'll stop listening to me and we'll get started here. The candidates have a 3 to 4 minute opening statement. Katie down here will raise her hand. Raise your hand right now, Katie. When you guys get to 3 minutes, and then when you get to 4 minutes, she's going to raise your hand frantically, and I'm going to start interrupting you. We'll then do questions. When we get questions, you'll have 2 minutes to respond, and again, Katie will raise her hand when you get to about 1.5 minutes. And then we'll get real frantic when you go up towards 2 minutes. I may interrupt you a bit, not in the opening statements or closing, but as we ask questions, just to clarify or to repeat something. If I take up too much time, we certainly will give you more time. So we're not going to be militant about that stuff today. Again, by the drawing, the opening statements, we'll start with Randy Boyd.
First 6 generations are from West Tennessee. I know we've got this is going to be audience response. So my family is from the town of Kenton, home of the White Squirrel. You don't get that in other parts of the state. When you go to West Tennessee, everybody can always finish that sentence. So it's great to have you guys.
It was the flying squirrels? Is that what I heard?
White Squirrel.
Oh, I heard, I'm glad I heard that. So for the people live streaming, it is the white squirrels.
I just really look good about my squirrels and you can meet them, but so no, they don't fly. I'm a family man. My wife and I have been married for 33 years. We have 2 sons. And I got an email from somebody the other day that gave a new title. People always ask, well, should we call you Commissioner or Randy? The new title is Grandpa. So in April, we're going to have our first granddaughter, which we're extraordinarily excited about. Thank you. 2018 is going to be a great year, no matter what. I'm passionate about education. I'm the first one in my family's history to ever go to college. My dad didn't believe in it, but he said if I wanted to go, he'd give me a job to pay my way through. So I ran injection molding machines, 12 hours each shift, 2 shifts each weekend, and managed to be the first one in my family's history to graduate from the University of Tennessee at age 19. So I've always been passionate about education and want to make sure other children have the same opportunities. I'm an entrepreneur. I had a Dodge Maxi van with no air, no radio, selling electric fencing out of the back of my van. Customers started asking me for a product called Invisible Fence. We've got everything we own with that product, and today we have 700 employees and 4,600 products headquartered over in Knoxville. I think it's important that the next governor has some business experience, has made a payroll. It's also good that the next governor is an entrepreneur and knows something about innovation and disruption. So I'm hopeful that those skills will lead me well. Lastly, I think it's also important that the next governor has some public service experience. And I've had 2 opportunities to volunteer. Once as the governor's special advisor on higher education, I was able to pursue my passion to provide more young people an opportunity to go to college. We were able to take a nonprofit that I had started called Tennessee Achieves and expand it to something called Tennessee Promise that now allows every kid to go to technical and community college for free, matched with a mentor. Then I get to come back and be the governor's commissioner for economic and community development. And we were able to recruit 50,000 new jobs for our state. So while I think it's good to have an outsider or a non-politician, it's also good to have somebody that's actually been there, done that, and knows a little bit about how to get things done. So what do we do? 4 minutes? So what do we do? I want to make Tennessee the state of opportunity. Opportunity for a better education, opportunity for a better job, and an opportunity for everybody. I'm looking forward to some questions today that will allow us to do that. And say one last thing, and I'm hopeful I get the opportunity to talk about this as well. You have my pledge. As the next governor, we are going to be the most transparent state in the country. And I look forward to sharing some ideas on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Bill Lee.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I, too, am grateful for the role that you play, the press, in our lives. I've shared that when I went off to college, I remember I had my local newspaper sent to my school so that I could keep up with life at home. And you are the connection between people, us, and the world outside. And so I really am grateful for what you do. And I'll give you a brief introduction about myself as well. I am a business guy. I run a company called Lee Company. We are mechanical contractors, HVAC and plumbing, electrical business. My grandfather started that company. I took it over in the 90s and grew that company to about 1,200. Mostly skilled tradesmen, plumbers and pipe fitters and welders, electricians. It's a great business, great opportunity. I'm also involved in a family farming operation. I'm a 4th generation agricultural family, part of a 4th generation. My grandfather started a Hereford cattle business. We sell meat to farmers markets and restaurants throughout the region, so have a deep history in the agriculture industry. I'm a guy who, in part because of a tragedy in my life, my first wife was killed when I was 40, and I share that story because God used that to impact me in a powerful way. It's certainly one of the most transitional times in my life. It was also one that was inspirational. It caused me to look at my life and what mattered, and there are very few things that matter to me, and I wanted to spend my life about those things. I got involved in nonprofits in my community, mentored a kid in the inner city through a program called YCAP, because I chaired the YMCA. And that relationship with that kid, I started driving into his really difficult neighborhood once a week and spending one evening a week with him. That relationship opened my eyes to the power of education in a child. That passion ultimately landed me on the Higher Education Commission, started doing some public policy work around education. Had a similar experience because I got involved in a prison ministry called Men of Valor, a re-entry program. I decided to mentor a guy coming out of prison, and I spent one morning a week at 5 a.m. with him, still have a relationship with that man. That opened my eyes to the world of public safety and recidivism and sentencing reform, and got involved, was appointed to a governor's task force on recidivism, sentencing reform, started doing public policy around that, had done some work on tort reform in my business. So I touched the way government impacts and touches our lives, found it to be a little out of touch, was inspired in part because of that to become involved in the public arena. I really think the Founding Fathers intended for us to govern by we the people coming from the private sector into the public arena, and that's been an inspiration. I spent most of my life trying to make life better for 1,200 plumbers and pipe fitters and welders and electricians, and I decided that maybe I might be able to spend my life and use my life experiences to make life better for 6.5 million people, and that was a compelling thought for me. My wife and I bought an RV. We traveled to 95 counties in 95 days. We met the most remarkable people in any state in the union, and we found that it doesn't matter whether you live in downtown Nashville or Unicoi County. People want to have a good job. They want to have a good school for their kid. They want to have a safe neighborhood. And as governor, I will be committed to that. I have a great deal of hope for that as well. On that RV that my wife and I went to every county in, there's a scripture reference, Psalm 71:14. It says, "As for me, I will always have hope." And I'm a guy who had a season in life that hope was hard to find, but I knew where to find it. I have a great deal of hope for Tennessee to, in fact, lead the nation. And hope is not a strategy, but it's helping me to develop a strategy. And I would be honored to answer questions today and let you learn a little bit more about me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. You timed that well because I was about to cut you off and you started to quote scripture, and you were that was not a point at which I was going to cut you off, so thank you. Kay White.
Hello. I want to thank you for having us and for being here. And I, too, start my morning with the Johnson City Press. It comes to our mailbox. We are not totally internet compelled when it comes to our news, but we do appreciate the people on television and the internet that also share the local and state and national news. I would like to tell you that I am a wife, a mother, grandmother, and maybe the only one on the stage that is a great-grandmother. But I take joy and pride in that. I taught Sunday school for 20-some years at First Baptist Church in Churchill, and I didn't just teach those young people. I brought them to my house. I also taught them some skills. I think I almost lost the microphone.
Switch it, see if that works better.
I taught them skills to make, to cook, to bake, to do things that a homemaker would have to do. I was fortunate in that I was able to stay home with my 5 children and be an at-home mother. I knew how to sew because I learned it in school. I learned how to sew in home economics, one of the classes that is not taught today. I was very involved in high school. In fact, I was the Tennessee State president of the Student Library Association, so I've been to Nashville in that capacity many years ago. But I want you to know that many of the life skills that I now see that God allowed me to be a participant in has led me to this moment of sitting here before you. I am a Christian, constitutional conservative. I believe that the laws of our land should apply to everyone and even to those who make them, our legislators. I do not believe that they should make a law for you and exempt themselves. I believe in education. I have one, I didn't graduate, but I went a couple years to ETSU before marrying. In my day and time, there were not a lot of people that could afford and that did go to school. I worked my way through those 2 years. My father was a pipe fitter, Bill, at Eastman Chemical Company, and he went to school, night school, until he became an engineer. And my mother worked for Grosset and Dunlap. But both of them kept us in church, and there was never a night that we didn't get on our knees and pray, because we never forgot our Creator. In addition to that, when we get to the political point, I ran in 1996 for Congress, the first and only woman that had ever run in East Tennessee for a congressional seat. I won the primary. I think there were actually a couple attorneys, several in our primary, and I won by a big landslide. I did that by going out, reaching out to the people. And in case some of you in here are Democrats and you've never heard of a conservative Democrat, that is what the media referred to me as. So later on, down the road, I remarried. The father of my children is deceased. We had a 485-acre farm. I kept the books on that farm. We also had a 150-acre dairy farm. Now, you talk about seeing hard workers, and I often had to cook lunch for the whole group, because in those days, there were not so many subdivisions. People lived far out, and I would cook the meal for maybe 12, 15 people at lunch when they were there working. But, you know, those were good times and good memories. And I just want you to know that I crossed this state for Rick Santorum in 2012. I was his state chairman. And I showed that an election can be won without millions of dollars. Now, I'm not being ugly or unkind to any of the other candidates, but if I had millions of dollars, I would help someone with it. I would not spend it all on campaigning, because I feel that when the people make me their choice, I will be their voice.
All right,
And
we're gonna just
Yes,
a little
sir.
over 4 minutes. We're gonna end you right there, if that's okay. And I'm gonna ask Katie, when you hold your hand up, make sure you do it real high so you all can see. You want finish your sentence though, please. Finish
I'm
your sentence.
sorry.
Yeah, finish your sentence and then we're.
did you say 4 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all
I
right.
was so into talking with everyone and sharing my heart. I'll just close by saying that I will work hard. I have owned a small business, and my present husband, owned 19 grocery stores and employed up to 1,000 people. So thank you, God bless you, and
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, and we'll come back to you. And we'll go ahead with Craig.
Madam, thank you. I'm Craig Fitzhugh, and I'm certainly proud to be here. As a matter of fact, in the room here with some West Star folks is the person that I ran against 24 years ago, my first shot at the legislature. I'm glad to see her in here. I'm a product of Tennessee. I was born in Brownsville, raised in Ripley, Tennessee, and have lived in Tennessee all my life except for the 4 years that I spent in the JAG Corps and the Air Force. It's my home. It's every piece of the body of work that I have, I owe it to Tennessee and the people in Tennessee. Again, just a little biographical sketch on me. I was the first person in my family, as was my wife, of almost 44 years to go to college. It opened both of our minds and our hearts to others. We went to a college that had more students than our entire county. She's a public school teacher now, retired, as is my daughter and my only sister-in-law. We believe in public education, have all our lives, and we are all products of public education at the secondary and the post-secondary level. We have raised our children in that town, and for a while I was a lawyer in Ripley with one other guy who is, I'm praying for him now, my senior partner. He's very sick and in the hospital now, and but anyway, he is a grand lawyer and taught me a lot more than just the law, about how the law can help people. Then moved into the banking business, a little community bank that was started in '39. My father came from the Air Force in '45 and started working at that bank. They called him a clerk. He was actually the janitor. He came in half the day and worked his way up, and I was proud to follow in his footsteps at that bank and still still let great people handle that bank while I'm doing some other things, and have spent 24 years in the legislature, which is the highest honor in my life to serve both in the minority and the majority with under 4 different governors. That's sort of my body of work, and the reason I'm running for governor is, as Randy said, it's the grandchildren. It's not my grandchildren, but it's children. It's children who may not be in these skyscrapers in Nashville doing well, but may be in families that are in the shadow of that. And I just think I have something more to offer in that body of work, so that's why I'm running. And I'm certainly proud to be here in this wonderful library. It's just absolutely amazing, one of the finest in the entire country. My daughter, who's wanted to be a teacher since she could carry a pen around, made weekly trips to the library when she was growing up. Libraries have changed. Libraries have transformed. They've moved from the hardcover books to the internet. And in my community, for instance, it is a place of activity and learning and wonder, especially with the computers. As far as the Press Association goes, or the press, I go way back as a newspaper person. At the age of 10 in Ripley, I was the first person to get the first 100 copies of the Lauderdale County Enterprise, stick them in my sack, and sell them around the square. They were sold for 7 cents a piece, and I got 2 cents. So I had, so I've got a long and distinguished career while I was in grade school doing that. So, but the press. This is the First Amendment, ladies and gentlemen, that we're talking about, and we need to make sure that we honor and protect that fourth estate, so that they, in fact, can give us the truth when sometimes we as legislators or politicians or even business people don't have it. You can believe newspapers. You can believe your weekly newspapers. And I'm glad to be a part of that and the fine newspapers we have all across the state. I look forward to answering your questions, and thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Karl Dean.
Well, thank you all for being here. And this is a special room. During my time as mayor, one of the things I was proudest of is the work we did on libraries. I've hosted and been involved in many events here. And if there's anything that represents our city the best, it's this building. Thank you to the sponsors. Special thanks to the West Star folks who drove over here. I have spent a huge amount of time on I-40 in the last 9 months. It is the most beautiful road in America, and I'm sure you had a great drive. I want to thank particularly the ACLU, Think Tennessee, and the Press Association. The press does a wonderful job. My friend Frank Daniels is here, and I remember very well when I was mayor, I get the Tennessean, we delivered the top of my driveway, and some mornings, Frank, I would kind of bound up the driveway to get it, and some mornings it would be a slow, weary walk to pick it up. But it was always fair, and I appreciated it. I'm running for governor because I think the state wants a governor who is going to be moderate, pragmatic, common sense, and get things done. I don't think the state wants an ideologue as their governor. My experience in life has been, I worked as a public defender for 16 years, the elected public defender. I learned a lot about mental illness. I learned a lot about drugs and alcoholism. I learned a lot about crime. I learned a lot about victims. I spent time as our city's attorney, where I learned certainly the ins and outs of government on both the state and local level. And then I served as a mayor of this great city. And I had 2 very different terms. I had one term where, not because I was elected, but shortly after I was elected, we went into the greatest recession we've known since the Depression. We had the flood of 2010, and we had to manage our way through that. But at the same time we were doing that, we were investing in the city, planning for the future, and moving ahead. And then I had the second term where, by the end of the first term, you started seeing the TV show Nashville, the cranes started arriving, businesses were moving in, tourism went through the ceiling, we became the hit city. And so my advice is always to people, if you run for mayor, it's a great job. Take the hard term first, have a more fun the second one. Look, I think the issues that matter to the people of Tennessee are, number one, public education is the thing I worked hard on as mayor. I think that is the thing that is going to move our state forward more than anything else. We need to be a state that produces more college graduates, But we also need to be a state that recognizes that we need to have the apprenticeship, technical, and vocational programs that will allow all youth to get good jobs where they can raise a family. I think we need to pay our teachers better. I applaud Governor Haslam for adding additional teacher salary in the budget. We need to be doing more. I think that another area that I think is absolutely critical is you got to have a strong private sector economy. You know, problems don't take care of themselves without having an economy that is producing and creating jobs and creating opportunities and giving you a good tax base. And then I think healthcare is absolutely critical. You know, we've talked about healthcare, and I've heard from voters around the state, the biggest mistake the legislature has made was not doing the Medicaid expansion. You know, we have lost $3.54 billion. We have seen 10 hospitals close. We talk about caring for young people. You know, Tennessee ranks so low in every health indicator, and we have children and births that are affected by the fact that we didn't do the Medicaid expansion. People are less healthy. This is a great state. I firmly believe our best days are still to come, but we gotta take care of the issues that really matter and focus on working together, being pragmatic, and reaching across the aisle and getting things done. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will move into questions, and I've got sort of a system I'm going to rotate through. I'll start the first question with Bill Lee, and then we'll do a full round, and then I'll start with Kay, and we'll just so everyone is at a different point in the order. Also, we're doing different questions for different candidates, although I may come back, depending on time, and ask some of the same questions of different candidates as we go through. Katie will raise her hand pretty high when you get to 1.5 minutes and hold it up, and then start waving it too, and I will interrupt you at some point. The questions were submitted, as we said, by sponsors, by member newspapers, citizens, advocacy groups. I've edited the questions somewhat, so if they don't make sense, that's my fault, not the people who submitted them. Don't blame them. And as I said, the first question will go to Bill Lee. It's a question from the League of Women Voters. What are your thoughts on transparency in Tennessee state government? And specifically, would you support more transparency in state contracting, economic incentives, and environmental permitting?
I do believe that the taxpayers of Tennessee deserve transparency. I would be deeply committed to transparency at every level of government. I think that one of the challenges that we face is people don't trust the government, and part of the reason they don't is because we don't have access and transparency to the degree that we should. You asked about contracts, for example, and incentives for business. I think that while it's important to attract jobs into this state, it's really important that we as taxpayers understand what that process looks like, holding it accountable, making certain that we know how much money we pay for jobs, individual jobs, for example, and then making certain on the backside that those arrangements are followed through with. I think I think about open records. You know, we have an open records law that is not entirely open. I mean, there are certain instances where, for example, you're not allowed to take a cell phone picture of a record. You have to go through certain hoops to get that record, or you can't access it by email. You have to show up in person, and we need to be certain. And in fact, as governor, in business, we've digitized most all of our records. We've gone paperless for the most part in our company and many companies across the state. We need to do that with records so that people have immediate access to that. Transparency in open meetings. We need to, I believe we had a couple of exceptions when our open meetings law came into place. Now we have about 500. We need to look hard at access and how we do it in this state, and transparency is critical to taxpayers.
All right, thank you. We'll move on. Kay White, this is a question on education that was submitted by the Southwest Tennessee Development District. If you are elected governor, will your administration continue the Drive to 55 program created by Governor Haslam, which among other things guarantees at least a 2-year degree or certificate to all Tennesseans? And if so, if you will continue it, how would you achieve the funding and the program goals?
I can't really say that I support the Drive to 55. There are some individuals in Tennessee who do not want to go back to college. I told you before that my father went to night school and continued his education. That was his desire. But to force people or make them feel they have to or they can't get this job or that job, I feel that skills should be implemented more in our schools as they used to be. I am for education, but I'm also for going back to, because the reason, I didn't finish that sentence, I'm sorry. I'm for going back to some of the old skill training that we used to have. In the 1960s, perhaps you're not aware, but we were graduating our graduates at 100%. Do you know that today we're graduating our high school students at 36% ability to go on to college or to survive in the world out here? It's not all about a formal education. It is about being wise, having some common sense, knowing skills. And I have some plans, really good plans, to get people out of our jails, which is costing us a lot of money. And with that, I will close by simply saying that is to give a tax incentive to anyone who will take someone that's a nonviolent criminal out of our jail system and give them a job and training, and we'll give them a tax break. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go on now to Craig Fitzhugh, and a question again on education. This is from the editorial department at the Citizen Tribune in Morristown. Tennessee has begun climbing in national rankings of student performance, in part due to a focus on increased rigor. What will you do as governor to make sure that Tennessee continues to improve the public education of Tennessee's children?
Thanks. Yes, we do have to have rigor in our classrooms and our education system from start to finish. But we also need to not take away the literal joy of learning. And I'm certainly for evaluations. I believe that we got off to a really bad start on teacher evaluations, and we're barely overcoming it now. We lost some great teachers. But we're getting back to where instead of one evaluation every 6 years, we went to almost 6 evaluations every 1 year, and now we're balancing it to a better evaluation. So yes, we have to make sure our teachers are trained. We need to give them that training. We need to give them the education and prepare them to be better teachers. And then, as we've said before, as we all say, I think, we need to pay them as the professionals that they are. And we need to recognize that profession again, which we've lost. So yes, but I think the key to education is becoming clearer to me. We start with some type of pre-K, early learning, and then by the 3rd grade, that child has to learn to read. If that child can learn to read by the 3rd grade, from the 3rd grade on, they can read to learn. And the teacher can assist that, and at some point in time, that light will flicker on or flash on in that child's mind, and the joy of learning will be there. And if we can keep that in education, I think it's as important as the rigor that we want as well.
Thank you. We move on to Karl Dean, and a question from the Paris Post-Intelligencer. In Henry County, a long-awaited TDOT project to widen Highway 641 is expected to begin this year. What is your position on regional infrastructure projects, such as that, but the others that are planned or underway? Would you support scaling back these projects or even expanding what's already been proposed in terms of infrastructure spending?
Well, I think anybody who's served in government certainly understands the importance of infrastructure. And one of the things that doesn't get talked enough about, for instance, while I was mayor, we spent probably more money on things underwater and underground in terms of stormwater management, cleaning water, making the city work. Infrastructure is expensive, but if you ignore it and you don't take care of it, you end up paying more later. Infrastructure is also a key economic development tool. So I would support sort of expanding regional efforts to have roads available that are going to help bring in business, bring in jobs to areas. I think that's vitally important. I think the regional concept in terms of transportation is important, whether it's mass transit or whether it's roads. And I think as governor, I think I would be anxious to play a leadership role in working together on regional issues to bring people together to solve those problems. Because when you get to county lines, at some point, you're going to need the state's help. One of the things I'm proudest of as mayor, when I was mayor, I asked all the mayors in Middle Tennessee to come together, and we formed the Mayor's Council, where basically we all met regularly to work on issues that have faced our region. And the main issue that faces our region is transportation, and there's widespread agreement. But to get that to the next level, you're going to need leadership from the governor's office.
Thank you. We go now to Randy Boyd. A question from, again, the Citizen Tribune in Morristown. A free and open press is essential to the operation of our democracy. What will you as governor do to increase transparency, improve the state sunshine laws, and protect regulations mandating public notice in newspapers?
So thank you, and it gives me an opportunity to talk a little bit about making Tennessee the most transparent state in the country. So as a businessman, I've learned very quickly that if you're going to be successful, you have to empower your associates. And as I would always share with my associates, information is the corollary of empowerment. If you don't have information, you can't make decisions like owners. And so as a company, we knocked out all the walls and all the partitions, one big open space. I'm in the same desk with everybody else. Because we're a pet company, we also had dogs running around. But we're a private company. Everybody got complete financial statements at the first of each month, whether you're the first day on the job or if you've been there for 20 years. I believe that information is critical to making decisions and running an organization. When I became Commissioner of Economic and Community Development, we did similar things. We knocked out all the walls and all the partitions. I had a small desk in the middle with everybody else. We started sharing staff notes with the entire department. We did a monthly or weekly newsletter to everyone in the state. And importantly, we created something called Open ECD, an online site where people could go and get every bit of information that they could possibly get about all of our programs across the state. You could not only access the information, but it was in a very presentable manner. One of the things that I want to do as governor is take those same type of cultural changes and take it all the way through state government. We're here for the people. We're here to serve them, and the best way we can serve them, the best way we can empower them as better citizens is to share information. And so that's what we intend to do.
Okay. We'll go now, we'll switch to Kay, and again, I'm kind of rotating through so everyone hits different order in the questioning. Kay White, a question from the ACLU on justice reform, something you mentioned in your earlier response. In Tennessee, when an individual is convicted of a felony, they lose their right to vote. More than 400,000 Tennesseans are barred from voting by current law. 75% of those individuals are no longer incarcerated, but they remain disenfranchised. Restoring their right to vote requires completing their prison sentence, parole, and probation, and payment of court fees and fines. While fulfilling financial obligations is clearly important, would you reform Tennessee's voter restoration laws?
Yes, I would. And let me tell you why. It's simple. Because those young people or old people or in between, it doesn't matter. When they serve their time and then they have to get out and try to make a living for their children, their families, get back to some normalcy, why do they go back to their drugs if it was drugs? Why do they go back to crime? I'm going to tell you why, because they have such a financial burden on them that it's hard to ever overcome. I'm about restoring lives. I'm about rebuilding lives. Everyone in this room has done something in their past that they regret. Everyone in this room would like to say, I wish I had not done this or that. So why, once someone has served their time, why do they have to be burdened down in our society by saying, remember when? Because we all have a past. Let's try to restore those lives. Let's try to rebuild those lives. And it would start with the restitution, because I feel that sometimes young men that have the sin they've committed has been against themselves, if you want to call it sin or crime, because they have violated their probation, they've taken drugs, etc. But I think it all stems back to one thing. The godlessness in our state and in our entire nation has resulted in crime. It's resulted in alcoholism, broken families. So I want to get our state back to showing these people that we do care, and we will try our best to help them get back to voting and being a part of our society, because that will make us great.
Okay.
Thank you.
To Craig Fitzhugh, we'll stay with voting. This is a question from Think Tennessee. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security officially notified 21 states that hackers based in Russia attempted to gain access to their voter registration systems during the 2016 election. Today, roughly 80% of voters in the U.S. vote on machines that produce a paper backup, but here in Tennessee, only less than 10% of the voting machines produce a paper backup. In light of known efforts to disrupt our elections, should Tennessee adopt a voting system that provides a paper trail to verify election results and protect the integrity of our elections?
The short answer, I think, is yes. It seems that paper trails have been shown to be an effective tool to make sure that those votes are correct. We started with the electronic, and it's gotten so much more sophisticated. So yes, I think a paper trail is good. I think that we have in HAVA funds, we have over $20 million lodged in our state, at least that we can draw down from the federal government to do things like this. So I think there's a definite need to do that. And I also believe that now we can go to same-day registration for voters. Now we have the voter identification that is some of the strongest in the nation. So we know who's going to vote, and we know that they're qualified to do that. And we can do that. We can push the registration closer to the actual day of election so you can register and vote. And I think that would help the integrity of our elections as well.
Okay. Karl Dean, this is a question from and I think I have my notes wrong, and so I apologize, but the Marion County News, Jasper Journal, and South Pittsburgh Hustler combined. If there was a competition for newspaper names, South Pittsburgh Hustler just won. The question is, a large number of state legislative measures have substantial fiscal notes associated with them, and the results ultimately vary in effectiveness of the bills that are passed and the accuracy of the fiscal notes. Would you be willing, as governor, to support limits on legislative action that eclipsed certain financial thresholds? And a follow-up or parallel to that, should Tennessee perhaps adopt some sort of clause that forced the legislature to reconsider measures after its fiscal impacts in the real world were actually known?
Well, I would be reluctant to say that the governor can force the legislature to do much. But what I would try to do is, when you're passing laws, when you're doing a budget, what you have to do is have clear priorities. You have to know what you want to get done, what you want to fund, and what order those things rank in terms of the future of the state. And that's what I tried to do as mayor. I mean, it was painful going through it, but one of the things about being the mayor during the Great Recession was you had to make tough decisions. We literally had less money one year than we had the year before. And you had to make cuts. But at the same time, for me, it was about the city's future. And so we prioritized education. We prioritized public safety. And we didn't reduce police officers, we added. We didn't cut education. And we didn't stop investing in the future of our city. So, I mean, I think it's important to know how much your proposals cost. And it's important to know what their financial implications are. But the biggest decisions governors make is how you prioritize funding. And for me, the priorities I've already stated are education, economic opportunity, and healthcare.
All right, we go down to Randy Boyd. This is a question on tax incentives from the Beacon Center. Do you believe that taxpayer dollars should be used to subsidize stadiums for professional sports teams? And where do you draw the line between what the government should and should not spend tax dollars on? Who, in other words, picks the winners and losers?
So I don't think the government should pick the winners and losers, but I think with regards to any type of economic investment, whether it's a sports team or any other civic facility like an auditorium or a convention center, or whether it's investing in recruiting a business, whether it's investing in helping a business expand, you have to look at each case independently and do the economics of it. When I was Commissioner of Economic and Community Development, we looked at hundreds of deals all throughout the year, and we would calculate what our return on investment was. We'd look at the amount of money that we would invest in training people and how much money we would invest in public infrastructure, and then we'd look at the expansion the company was going to do, and then how many additional dollars they would come back just to the state, and determine what our return on investment was. In the 2 years I was there, we had 50,000 new jobs committed. We had $11 billion in new capital investment, and our return on investment was 46%. So I think, like we did in economic development, every community has to do the same thing. Not all deals are created equal, so I don't think we can say every stadium's a good deal. We can't say, every one's a bad deal. We have to look at the economics of each one and do that analysis.
Okay, and we will go to a question for Bill Lee from the ACLU again. This is on justice reform, an issue I think you talked about in your opening statement. In Tennessee, thousands of legally innocent individuals who are eligible for release are detained in jail as they await trial simply because they cannot afford to make bail. In effect, Tennessee operates a two-tier system of justice, whereby wealthier individuals are freed, while people with fewer financial resources remain in custody. There are non-financial alternatives that have been shown to be equally or more effective in getting folks to show up to court. Do you believe Tennessee's bail bond system should be reformed, and if so, how?
You know, I referenced my work with the prison ministry that ended up having me spend time multiple times in the prisons with incarcerated men over the years. And I've done a lot of work in that area, talked with a lot of folks, met a lot of people that are in the system and will come out. The truth is that 98% of everyone that's in prison or in jail, they're going to come out. In this state, about half of them will go back and recommit another crime, and taxpayers pay for it, but the human capital there is enormous. And if you listen to enough incarcerated folks, you realize that there's a really deep problem. And we as a state owe it to all of our citizens to approach reentry in a much more powerful way. If we can reduce recidivism, so the program I worked with has a 15% recidivism rate because they intersect, it's a men's program, they intersect men in prison a year before they get out. They work with them in transitional housing, they work with them in job placement. Our company has placed many of those folks. I've mentored one of those men, and the way we approach reentry is critical to this state, including how we look at bail, how we look at parole, how we look at a number of challenges to folks reentering, saving taxpayer dollars and human capital. So yes, we ought to look at it.
Okay. I'm going to go slightly off script right now. We had a number of questions that were about local control. And so what I'm going to do actually is give the same question, maybe slight variations as I go through each of you, on the question of local control in terms of particularly cities. It's an issue that comes up in Memphis, most recently with the city council's desire to take down the statues, state, and feeling the state was preventing that. I know other cities in terms of guns in parks, in terms of how they spend their education funds, feel that the state should give them more latitude. So to that end, what are your thoughts on giving more control to localities, be they big cities or small towns? I'll start with Craig Fitzhugh.
Thank you. Surprised me there. Yes, I believe in local control. I'll get a little political, I guess. It seemed to me for many years the Republican view was the best government is at the lowest level. But here recently in the legislature, the majority party has taken it on themselves to sort of get in cities' business and counties' business on various things that, like you mentioned. I think that they were right the first time. I think the lowest level of government is what we have. It is a tiered system, and some things just ought to be done by that local level. We see it from charter schools that the mayor's certainly familiar with when the local education system here decided not to have a charter school and the state overruled that and did it. We see it in firearms where people had parks, cities had parks, or other things other than firearms, as we know in Memphis. But they were overruled in trying to do what they wanted to do with their particular jurisdiction. So I don't think that's good. There are cases where on a state overall situation it might be best for the legislature to weigh in, but we have given as the legislature those authorities to the cities, and the legislature can take them away, but until they do on a consistent basis, I think local control is good. In fact, you voted for those people and in your communities, and you should let them handle those local issues. Thank you.
Governor Dean, this qualifies, Governor Dean, excuse me.
Oh, thank you.
Mayor Dean. Can we rewind the tape real quick? Now I got to call everyone governor. Mayor Dean, this is definitely qualifies as a bit of a softball as a former mayor, but are there appropriate, let me vary the question a little bit. Are there appropriate points for the state to dictate to towns and cities how they should do things in terms of, even against the wishes of their local council, their local city council, and so on?
Sure. I mean, we have a system, and I like to not refer to local government as the lowest government. I like to refer to it as the government nearest the people. And we have a system where certain issues are generally resolved on the local level, some are resolved on the state level, and some are resolved on the federal level. And there's not one answer to this question. I mean, there are lots of issues, and education is a complicated issue because there are lots of state money, lots of state regulation, and lots of state policies. And that's been true for ages. And, you know, I think as a general rule, the local government should follow the rules and the laws of the state when it comes to education. That's where education policy on the broader level has been set. An example I will give would be, another one would be this issue about guns in parks. You know, I support the Second Amendment, support people's right to have arms, but when that legislation was first passed, in that legislation it said it's up to local governments to decide whether they wanted to opt into it. And Nashville didn't opt in because we didn't, our council did not want to have guns in our parks. And so a year goes by and that seems to work and everybody's happy. And then all of a sudden someone says we can't have them make this decision. We're going to take that authority away. And they probably have the ability to do that. But the issue there to me is just judgment, reason, and being practical. Why take that away? Why say the local government can't make a decision about a city park? Why say we can't make a decision about what goes on in our riverfront or what goes on in the park across the street? I mean, so it's always a balance. It's always what you need is people with prudence and judgment making the decisions. And there's not one hard, fast rule. But let me add one other thing, because I thought Mr. Lee mentioned the number of exceptions for the state on open meetings laws. I think Bill said something about 500. You know, I think one of the things what would be good, particularly in terms of open meetings and open records, would be if the state followed the rules that they impose on local governments. We don't have those exemptions. We don't have, we are much more open.
Randy Boyd.
So any variation to the question, or?
No, well,
Okay.
again, you've heard the
Yeah,
two sides of it.
So I'm good. So with my company, as I mentioned, we believe in empowerment and believe that the people on the front line make the best decisions. The same thing in government. The people at the local community can make the best decision. I've got 50 county mayors, 65 city mayors. I've traveled, endorsing me, and I've traveled across the state working with them. They go to the same barbershop, to the same diner with their citizens, and they know what they need. And so they're much more responsive. I worry that Nashville sometimes does to our local communities what we complain about Washington, D.C. doing to our state and usurping the authority of our local communities. So two things. One, as governor, I will have a philosophy that will always say when somebody brings me a new piece of legislation, a new initiative, the first question will always be, can the local community make this decision for themselves? And if they can, then they should. And the second thing that I've noticed, and it's very ironic, but there's over a couple of dozen cities and counties across our state that have actually had to hire lobbyists to communicate for them at the state level. That shouldn't be. One of the things I want to do that I think may be a first is have 2 deputy governors. Usually the governor has 1 deputy governor, and my experience has been they're focused on legislation and the legislators, and most of it is very Nashville-centric. I'm going to have a second deputy governor that will be the deputy governor of local government. And he or she's focus will be on being the eyes and the ears and the voice of our local communities. As governor, I want to make sure I'm their champion. And I plan on spending a lot of time in our communities and not in Nashville, but I want to have somebody that wakes up every day representing them and supporting them. Thank you.
I'll go to Billy with a slight variation. How, you know, I know in Memphis, because that's where we're based, but I imagine most towns and cities, some fashion, have this complaint that they don't get enough. They don't get enough in terms of the economic incentives, in terms of the spending. Does there need to be a revision or a relook at how money is doled out to towns and cities around the state?
Well, I'll initially agree with you that I think West Tennessee actually has probably drawn the short stick on focus on economic prosperity. It's why I developed something called a commitment to Memphis and Shelby County, but actually more extensively to West Tennessee. I do think we have to look at, one of the challenges, one of the biggest threats that we face in our state, from my perspective, is what happens in business a lot of times. You look at a balance sheet and your year will look good, but if you dig into the P&L and you look at statements of accounts, you'll find out that you have some real troubling things going on in certain areas. And while large parts of our state are prospering, and while large sections of our communities are doing well, we have sections in our state that are not prospering. We have 19 distressed counties economically in poverty. 5 years ago, we had 18. There are some things there are people being left behind. In our education system, while we're making great strides forward, the achievement gap is not moving. In our business, if we have 7 groups in our company and offices around the region, and a couple of those offices are struggling, then we'll take the resources of our senior management team and we go to those offices and we figure out how it is that we're going to resolve the challenges they have. And I think that we have to do that. We have to look at our rural communities. We have to look at our urban inner cities. We have to look at the regions of the state that haven't gotten the focus that they deserve and the commitment that they deserve, so that everyone will actually have access to the prosperity that Tennesseans deserve.
All right, and to Kay White, again, would you be in a place where, if a city, a town, its town council or city council voted to do something that you disagreed with, okay, a policy you didn't agree with, but that town voted unanimously to do it, how would you approach that as governor?
Well, as your governor, I would look at each county. We have 95 counties. And listen, I have been in many of those distressed counties that Bill mentioned, and they are there. If you live in Nashville, or even Memphis is a larger area, but they also have different problems. You can never judge all counties by one or two of the more affluent counties. For instance, I would like to say on the education level, I've been told by many, you need to support school choice. But let me tell you, if you brought school choice to Unicoi County, they have one junior high, one high school. What would happen to those teachers when suddenly all the parents said, they have better schools in Johnson City, let's take them in as we go to work? The teachers in Unicoi County would be without a job soon. So you can see how we need to improve all of our county schools, not just say, take them out and leave the teachers behind. We have some very good, dedicated, educated teachers in these small counties. Also, on the line of the statues that was mentioned earlier, I don't agree with the statues of history being taken down. Do I like our history? All of it? No, absolutely, nor do you. I'm a common sense person. I'm a non-establishment person, but I have a head full of sense. And let me tell you, we have a historical community. We have people that like our history, reading about it, because that bad history brought us forward to today when we can love one another. The black people are as important as the Hispanic people and the white people. We are a community, and I would try to instill in the people of Tennessee and our legislators, some of them that are elected, they think that puts them over and above. I disagree. But yes, I do support trying to look at our cities and our mayors and talk with them and find out what's going on in their counties and what's best for them. Thank you.
Okay. Back to some of the specific submitted questions, and I'll, again, in my rotation here, which someone later will tell me I completely screwed up, I'm sure, but it looks like there's some order to it. Back to open government issues, which obviously, given the Press Association and other folks behind this, is a big issue for us. This is from the Tennessee Coalition of Open Government. In Texas, and this is for Karl Dean, Mayor Karl Dean. In Texas, businesses that contract with the government have been able to prevent the release of information in their government contracts. For example, Boeing was able to prevent disclosure of information in their lease agreement with the Port of San Antonio, even though the Attorney General there had argued it did not qualify as a trade secret. We fear here in Tennessee that companies are going to start claiming trade secrets on information in government contracts or documents that will hurt the public's availability to know the value of public grants or property given to private companies. Where do you stand on this issue if it were to come up in Tennessee?
Well, I think, there is case law about when the government contracts with a private entity to do certain government functions, and they are working for the government, some, if not all, aspects of that relationship then are considered public. When you get into the more detailed in this question about trade secrets and other things like that, I don't have an answer off the top of my head. I think it's obviously something the courts would look at. I don't think you should use contracting with private entities as a way to circumvent open records or public meetings requirements. So I would, in that sense, I would say you want to make sure that just because you have a contract with a private entity, you're not circumventing open records laws, but getting into details how far it extends, whether it extends to a trade secret or proprietary information. I think you would need more information, and maybe that's decided by case law.
And I might bring this question to everyone, because it hits everyone in a different way. So we'll do this question again to everyone. Even if that puts at risk a big investment, an auto plant, a Google, does the potential private investment outweigh the public's right to know?
Well, certainly the public has a right to know all of the details involving public money. And then certainly there would be, you would hope, if there's public money involved, certain reporting requirements from the private industry, if it's an economic development deal, explaining exactly what benefits the city, the state is getting out of the deal. But I don't think it would extend so far that it would go into trade secrets or putting the company in a financially disadvantaged position in terms of competition.
Okay. Randy Boyle, you obviously dealt with this in your role in state government. Where is that line between transparency? Everyone today has talked about the need for transparency and the problems of exceptions in the Public Records Act, and yet when you're out recruiting company, whether you were economic development or as potential governor, there are secrets, there are deals to be made, there are compensation plans, there are investment that companies often want to keep secret. How do you balance that?
So I think it's a question of timing. So you're going to have some initial conversations with companies that may need to keep certain information private from their competitors. Maybe in some cases it may impact their employees. During the early negotiations, we need to protect their privacy as much as we can. But in the end, in every case, the program is made public. And the other thing that the Haslam administration instituted about 7 years ago that I think is incredibly important is an accountability agreement. So we will make public the incentives and the return on investment, so people can say, this looks like a good deal for the state of Tennessee if they live up to their agreement. With the accountability agreement, if they don't live up to their agreement, they don't get the funds. Usually it's pay for performance. You have to actually hire the people before you get the funds. You have to actually make the investment before you get reimbursed. But then in the end, later on, if they still haven't lived up to it, we have the opportunity to claw back money if something goes backwards. So I think with accountability after the fact, we have the ability to be able to provide the public with the information they need to understand all the transactions that we do.
Again, go to Billy, and then we'll come to KY. Billy,
Yeah.
where is that balancing line?
Yeah, there is a balance, and you asked me this question a little bit earlier, and I talked about the need for accountability in that. And, our company finds ourselves in that situation where there is a request for proposal, and you submit all of your information, and it's all private. And then we have to make a decision as a company whether or not we want to disclose the information that's required in this proposal request or not. And ultimately, the state has a responsibility, I think, to, once they're ready to make a deal with a private sector company that is going to involve taxpayer funding, then that has to be transparent and open. And then the company has a decision to make whether or not it wants to reveal trade secrets and engage in that process.
Even if it means, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but even if it means, in Memphis it happens where people will go across the border to Mississippi and access the airport and all the things in the city, but the rules in Mississippi tend to be a lot softer. That happens in other parts of the state, border communities. So even if a project, $500 million project is at risk, you would push for that transparency.
Well, by the way, in the case for moving to Mississippi, one of the things we ought to do in this state is have a tax rate that's lower than Mississippi. Currently, we're not competitive with the environments. That's how you solve that problem, really, is you create a more competitive environment in your state that makes folks want to come to your region, and that's the real solution, not to keep things in secrecy. So I do think there is a balance, obviously, and it's a part of the process when you reveal that information, but I am a person who genuinely believes that we need more transparency in how it is that we engage in contracts with private companies.
KY, the same question. I mean, where's the balance between transparency, the people's right to know, but we're all talking about jobs and economic development, and sometimes those companies demand a certain level of secrecy.
Well, I think that trade secrets is entirely different from transparency of, for instance, your local government. And you could tell probably I was a little antsy and excited to get to talk with you about this. For instance, in the counties, we recently have a new school being constructed, some state funds, some of your tax money is coming up there, and local funds very much. They have raised our property tax. I have a plan that we could cut those taxes. I totally agree that we are the third highest in the nation tax-wise. We've got to work on that, folks. We've got to keep people wanting to come to Tennessee. But what I'm telling you is there was land purchased all around because government officials, people in our county, and I'm not saying this, but I'm going to say many people in our county refer to them as the construction mafia, just to tell you like it is, because they went in and they purchased the land all around where they knew they could get the commissioners to vote so that that school would go in a particular place, and they have this under, of course, a corporation, so that no one knew that they on the board were part of the construction mafia that has bought the land up cheap, and then they will sell it at a higher price. So yes, we need transparency in our government as far as those type things, but in luring businesses here, I would have to say, if they have trade secrets, that's their secret. Thank you.
Thank you. Craig Fitzhugh, does there need to be, you've been in the legislature, does there need to be, again, I'll vary the question a little bit for you, reform or changes in how the state doles out tax incentives to recruit companies? And again, where's that balance between transparency and the company's desire to keep things secret?
I think most have said balance. And I would say that the key that we have to remember that makes us different when I'm talking about state government, it's your money. It's taxpayer money that you give us with the public trust, and we have to take care of that. So we have to make sure that the contracts do what they want to do, and if it are supposed to do, and if we have to have more information, then we should have it, and it should be disclosed. Now, the trade secret thing is correct, but I also see in different areas that these issues are coming up. I'm likely to agree that we need some type of policy, which may just be we have to look at things closely and make what's in the best interest of the public. We may lose a contract because of that, but so be it. There'll be somebody else out there that can do it as well. I'm a little concerned. Well, I recall a situation where the University of Tennessee presidency, now we have passed a law that the candidates won't be disclosed until there's just a final candidate. See, that's a disclosure issue as well, that in a different way. But so I'm becoming a little concerned about that. Now, I've been fortunate to be the author of some bills that look at the tax credits that we give and make sure that if they say the employers say they're going to hire 10 people, did they hire 10 people and did they pay the wage? And I certainly think that's sort of a back end a way to do it. But it's an issue that's certainly going to see executive and legislative attention in the coming years.
All right, back, and we'll do different questions back to the original format. This is a question out of the Memphis Daily newsroom, and we're going to rotate to Randy Boyd. Again, similar theme. Roughly a decade after it was first opened, the Memphis Regional Megasite is still not shovel-ready for the type of large-scale projects it was built to attract. Reportedly, this is why the site was not selected for a billion-dollar project just last year. As governor, will you commit to spending the sum $70 million needed to complete the megasite?
So I believe the Memphis Regional Megasite is the biggest economic driver in all West Tennessee. You know, when we located Nissan in Middle Tennessee, it drove the economy in this part of the state. When Volkswagen located in the southeast, it was a major driver for that part of the state. This is one of the most important things for my region of the state and for the people of West Tennessee. So we've got to get it done. But I would take issue with some of the questions. The site wasn't started 10 years ago. It's still not finished. The land was bought over 10 years ago, but my my former department released a report almost a year and a half ago that showed the entire history of the mega site and all the development that had been done, and then a timeline of everything that had left to be done with the exact amount that was going to be needed to spend. We're continuing to make the states continue to make those investments to get us to the point where we can have everything completely done. Two things. When we get it completely done, we have 4,100 acres. It's the best site in the entire United States. I believe that. It's flat. It's next to the interstate. You've got this huge labor shed nearby. If we fill the site up, we'll have 11,000 direct jobs. We'll have 14,000 indirect jobs and another 10,000 induced jobs. Over 30,000 jobs will be created once that site is filled. So it's worth the investment and the time that we need to do to make that happen. The second thing, though, I think it's also important that I think some people are missing. Some of the companies that look at a site don't have to have every single thing done before they locate into the site. So, for example, we were talking to a tire company a couple of years ago. They had a 24-month lead time to finish their project. It was going to take us at that point 22 months to finish the site. They were willing to make that commitment based on our commitment to finish. The nice part is the shorter amount of time that we've got left to finish the site, the more people we can talk to. So it's imperative to get the site, continue to get the site done. But today, we could land an account there. Thank you.
We'll move to Bill Lee. This is a question from Tennesseans for Quality Early Education. Tennesseans for Quality Early Education recently commissioned a statewide poll. In it, 86% of voters overwhelmingly indicated that they believe in early education, birth through second grade, that provides the building blocks for all future learning. Do you agree with this view? And more importantly, what would you do as governor to place an emphasis on these critical early years?
Early education is no doubt the foundation upon which children build their education, and it makes all the difference in their future. It's just like I'm all the time making references to construction industry because that's what I do, but if we don't create the right foundation, then everything we build on top of that is going to be suspect. So all the work we do in later grades, if we don't have a commitment to early childhood education, and the way we do that is by really emphasizing the attraction, the retainment, and the development of our early childhood educators. Right now, half of the teacher prep programs that we have in our state are substandard. They're subpar by measurement, and we have to change that. And we have to attract the best and the brightest, not only attract them, but retain the best and the brightest, because that foundation is critical to the future. Early childhood education is the key to the future in education.
All right, we move to Kay White. And I know someone mentioned this, I don't think it was you, it might have been, I apologize if I'm being repetitive here, but we'll talk about Medicaid expansion, and this is a question from Reverend James Levine, I may mispronounce his name, from Dyersburg. Governor Haslam tried to expand access to Medicaid in Tennessee under provisions of the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, but was rejected by the General Assembly, which left over 300,000 Tennesseans, many of them wage earners, unable to access affordable health care. If elected governor, will you push for the Medicaid match to provide health care to those unable to afford it? If not, what will your solution be to help low and middle-income Tennesseans have access to affordable health care?
Well, that's a little bit of a hard question because I would have to talk with a lot of the medical people because I want to know what is best for our citizens. I'm not on a giveaway program. As you can see, I want to lower your taxes. I'm not about Medicaid taking the responsibility of someone working and being able to pay their own. For people who are unable to pay, yes, we have teen care. Is teen care abused? Absolutely. Teen care has been abused. Our welfare system has been abused. I would promote trying to get people back into wanting to work, giving them the desire to make something out of themselves so they can pay their medical costs. But I also really believe that the medical cost is exorbitant. I mean, it has gotten so out of hand. You go to a doctor, your copay, listen, I know because before I had Medicare, before I went on Medicare, I could buy Coumadin for $4 at Walmart. I went on Medicare and suddenly my copay was more than what I was buying the whole prescription for. Does that make sense? Not hardly. And that's where we've got to take a real deep look at what's really going on with our taxes. And that is hindering the people that do need assistance, because those who don't need assistance, that choose to stay home, are not taking care of themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go now to, I think I got out of order here. No, I'm good. Craig Fitzhugh, this is another question for Tennesseans for quality early education. In 2015, Vanderbilt University had a study of voluntary pre-K, and researchers found that children who enrolled in pre-K were significantly better prepared for kindergarten. However, pre-K funding only serves about 20% of the income-eligible children in Tennessee. As governor, would you support maintaining current funding levels or expanding funding levels to low-income Tennesseans?
That's a great question, and I'll answer it. Man, I wish I'd have gotten that mega site or that Medicaid expansion question. But anyway, we'll go back to...
You do have closing statements. So
okay,
you
good,
have
thank
closing
you.
statements.
Yes, and I am a pre-K believer. If the first reason is that sister-in-law that I talked about has been a kindergarten teacher for 30 years, and she says, yes, I know exactly which child comes into kindergarten that's had pre-K. Now, the Vanderbilt study, I will never say that that anything coming from Vanderbilt is not correctly correct. I won't say that, but I think if you look at the studies after that and you sort of blend them in with the Vanderbilt study, we know that quality pre-K has dramatic effects, and the whole thing about pre-K is it goes to that reading, to get that child ready to learn to read so that he or she can read to learn after that. I am for pre-K in every class, in every school in the state. I think it's that important, and you know, it's expensive, and we'll have to work toward it. But yes, I think further quality pre-K is fundamental to our education in Tennessee.
Okay. And last question this round for Karl Dean. Justice reform, you mentioned your years as a public defender. Is justice reform, what would your priorities be? And where do you see common goals with the opposing party?
Well, actually, I think we're at a sort of a unique time in history where I think both parties are talking about criminal justice reform. There's an increasing interest in seeing people who have gone to prison, that when they get out of prison, they have a chance to become contributing members to society, and they're able to live productive lives. So for me, justice reform, I think one of the most basic things we have to do, and I would assume there'd be widespread bipartisan agreement on this, is that while people are in prison, that issues around alcoholism, mental health, drug addiction are actually addressed. That when people are released, that something has been done to sort of get to the foundational problem of why they're in prison. I also think it's important that while someone's in prison, that if we should be working to have GED programs and employment placement. Again, if people are able to succeed when they get out, the cost to the government goes down. It's also the right thing in terms of people living productive lives. I think the way to get bipartisan agreement on criminal justice issues is sort of to lower the dialogue volume a little bit and do things where you actually appoint maybe joint committees of both parties to look at issues and study the issue deeply and then arrive at recommendations. I think one party just pushing an issue for an ideological reason doesn't go far, but if you bring people together, have them examine the issue closely and make recommendations, I think you can accomplish things.
Okay. I think we'll go into closing statements. I'm looking at, I think it's good. We should have 2.5 minutes for closing statements, so Katie will raise her hand right at 2 minutes and begin to wrap things up, and we'll go back to my order. This all worked out. Randy Boyd.
Great, thank you. And thank you for allowing us to share our ideas with you today. So as your governor, serving you, I want to help you make Tennessee the state of opportunity. Opportunity for better education, opportunity for better jobs, and opportunity for everyone. Each one of these has a metric. So opportunity for better education means completing the Drive to 55. Drive to 55 wasn't something we made up. It was something that forecasters predicted we have to hit for people to have the jobs of the next decade. By the year 2025, 55% of our population needs to have some type of certificate or degree. The important thing to note, I want to make sure everybody's clear, that doesn't mean everybody gets a 4-year degree. Some of the things that we're talking about, getting a degree or certificate in welding or mechatronics, robotics, those type of skills are the things that make that up. In fact, 60% of the things we need to do to get there are those. I was in Mountain City in Johnson County about 6 months ago. Been to all 95 counties, but I remember one emotional moment. I'm there and I'm talking about the Tennessee Promise and that every kid in the state of Tennessee has the opportunity to go to technical school free of tuition and fees. And this young lady named Valerie was behind the counter. And when I say that, which I thought was good news, she starts crying. And I'm thinking, why would you cry? And so I asked her and she says, I'm in Mountain City. My dream was to be a nurse. But the closest school for me, it was the TCAT in Elizabethton. It was an hour's drive each way. I'd have to give up at 5 a.m. to drive there, take my classes, drive back, and we don't have a lot of money. So I'd have to work 40 hours a week on top of that. And after about 4 months, I had to give up on my dream. As governor, we're going to work with our TCATs and our community colleges and build a satellite campus on every high school across our state so that kids can actually have the opportunity to graduate not only with a diploma, but with a certificate and a job-ready skill. And if we do that, I think we can make the biggest difference toward completing our goal of the Drive to 55. And if we do, Tennesseans will make $9 billion more in annual income. It's not just an educational goal, it's an economic development goal. The second goal, making Tennessee the opportunity for better jobs. It's not just about jobs, it's about better jobs and higher paying jobs. The most important thing we can do is get our citizens that extra education, that extra training they need to fill those jobs and get those higher paying jobs. Second thing, though, I think we have to do is focus on entrepreneurship and small business. Those are the drivers of our economy. And the third thing is opportunity for everyone. As commissioner, I started something called the Governor's Rural Task Force. We brought 120 people from all around the state, and I see many of them in this room today. We spent over 18 months looking at the issues to how we can help these rural communities. As Bill mentioned, we have 19 distressed counties in our state. Being distressed means you're in the bottom 10% in the entire United States in poverty, income, and unemployment. We have a goal of having 0 distressed counties by the year 2025. Working together, we can achieve those goals and make Tennessee the state of opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Bill Lee for a closing statement.
Thank you. I appreciate today. I appreciate the opportunity to, I'm like Craig, there were answers I wish I could have given, but I mentioned a little bit earlier that, well, let me just start by saying this. I'm a conservative businessman. That's how I approach how I would govern and where we are in this state. Government does not have all the answers. Government does have an important role to play. For example, we talked about, I didn't specifically get asked the question about local jurisdiction versus state government. State government has a role to play when the local jurisdiction, for example, supersedes the law. In the case of sanctuary cities, for example, the state government has a role to make certain that that doesn't happen in our state. But government is not the answer for much of what I believe are real solutions for the future. We talked about the mega site. I'm in the construction business. I actually believe the mega site's a great disappointment that it wasn't ready. I know that we're doing this 45-story building over here, putting the infrastructure in it, and we know when it's exactly supposed to be ready and when it's ready to occupy. And it'll be there because the private sector understands that. On the mega site, you know, we could have 10,000 jobs there, but we don't have a workforce that's prepared for those jobs because my company knows that. 10 years ago, we created a vocational technical school. We've had 1,000 students go through that in our company because our education system for the last 2 decades has all but ignored vocational, technical, and agricultural education. By the way, it's 13% of our economy. It gets very little attention. Being an ag person, I'm fully aware of that. So government doesn't have all the answers, but you know what I think the greatest hope for us as a state is the private sector, the nonprofit community, our community organizations, the people that are on the ground that government can partner with to create, whether it's workforce development. I would not build facilities all over the state. What I would do is engage with the private sector who would be gladly welcome to open their doors to create satellite offices for vocational training around the state. Our company's done it. We've partnered with public high schools to create a change in the way high school looks so that the 4 out of 10 kids that don't go to college have opportunity that they haven't had for the last 20 years. But this doesn't come from creating a bigger government program. It comes from engaging in the power of the community that we have. I have a great deal of hope for this state. I actually think I have a great deal of hope for the future of Tennessee and that it can actually lead in America. And I look forward to the opportunity for creating a state that not only leads in this region, but that leads America as we lead forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kay White.
As your governor, and I'll try to talk fast, I can say more if I do because these other fellows talk a little faster than I do. But let me just tell you, this is the kind of person I am. I have had different experiences. I forgot to tell you that I've been a realtor for 25 years. I've worked with the business community. I have worked in grocery stores. I have worked in department stores. I am one of you. I have suffered like you. I was a single mother for a while. And I know what it is to work 2 jobs. I know. And I know that we're overtaxed on our property tax. I don't think all the people that are able to afford a home should be able to be responsible for paying a larger tax that affords everyone else the freebies. I don't agree with that. But let me tell you, I have a heart of gold, and I am the kind of person that will get people in as my commissioners that will know even more than I do because they will be specified for that one particular area. Like I told you about the schools, like I tried to tell you about our jail systems. I do agree that we do need a GED program. We need these people to come out of there wanting, giving them the desire and hope that there is a better tomorrow. And I will work with others. I am a negotiator. I'm able to talk with people, and I can cry with people. But most of all, I can say no to people. And I will tell you this, if someone isn't doing their job in the state and they're drawing a salary that you all are paying for, I'll be a little bit like Trump in that I'll say you're fired because we'll replace you. Because I'm telling you, we have had too many people that have never been weaned that are dependent on your taxes, and they have become legislators, many of them. I like term limits, but the term limits should be set by you, the people, who look at their records. And that's where transparency comes in. We need to know how our legislators are voting. Sure, it is provided on the website, but there are many older people who never look at that. It needs to be put in bold print in all of our newspapers, how they voted on every issue. I think we need to make it known that our legislators, you're going to be exposed. And this is what I will try to do, is build a great Tennessee for all Tennesseans. I'm proud of my state. I was born and raised here, and that's why I talk a little bit slow. And I want to thank you for having me and tell you, have a safe trip home, and God bless you.
Thank you. And Craig Fitzhugh?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. You did a great job, and the questions were just outstanding. It makes you know that, and these just weren't superficial questions, and I hope you know that this is just a wonderful place. This is a wonderful state, and I just want to give a little more. I don't know if I'm worthy of walking back behind you to that first floor on that Capitol, but I would like to have that opportunity. You know, we've talked about a lot of issues, and we won't all agree on a lot of issues. This morning, I'm sure we had disagreements, and you'll have disagreements with the person sitting next to you or members of your family. But I'm convinced that most Tennesseans can pick out these three issues and will say, hey, we can do better on these issues, and if we do better, Tennessee will do better. Now, I'm not for giving government handouts to everybody, but I'll tell you this. If somebody needs a helping hand, there's a helping hand on either side of a handshake. And when we all do better when we all do better. I stole that from somebody, but I think it's pretty good. If you think about it, we all do better when we all do better. If we can help West Tennessee get that mega site, if we can help Nashville with their transit problems, if we can help Rockwood with their transportation problems, we'll all be better as Tennesseans. So these are the three things. The first thing, and the most important thing right now, I'll get to the second one and tell you why, that I didn't make the second one first, but is health care. It is critical. It is critical today. As Mayor Dean said, he just didn't say it strongly enough. The worst thing the legislature has done in the 23 years that I've been there is not expand Medicaid. It's that simple. We've lost 10 hospitals. We shouldn't have lost any hospitals, for instance. And secondly, we didn't talk about opioids much. The governor has gotten a program that's comprehensive. It's just not funded enough. We are going to fight this war with our hands tied behind our back. If we expand Medicaid, we can fight it with a fair fight, and it is a tremendous problem we have. The second, and overall the first issue, is education. We talked about that a lot, and I think you know where I stand on that. We have to educate beyond the secondary school level. We have to go into post-secondary. Doesn't mean you have to have 4 years. Doesn't mean you have to have 2 years of college. It means we have to have technical training so we can get folks to fill up that mega site over in West Tennessee and the jobs that people are coming to our state because the good Lord put us in a good spot. Well, he made it a little too long and narrow for me right now, but other than that, it's a great state. And the third thing, quite quickly, I will say is jobs. You know, we have the lowest unemployment we've had in a while, but you know what? We also have the most percentage of people who are working at the minimum wage. They are cut out of the American dream, ladies and gentlemen, and we got to get them back in it. If we help them, if they do better, we'll all do better. Thank you. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. And Karl Dean.
Well, thank you. It was a great discussion, great questions, and great audience, and a wonderful place to host this. Let me go back to what I said in my opening remarks about the issues that I think are important for the state, and let me talk about it in an optimistic sense. I believe the most important thing that a governor can do is lead, and is to think about the future, and to work to put our state in a position where it can have a great future. And as I said in my opening statement, I believe Tennessee's best days are still to come. So if you look at the issue of education, which to me is the fundamental thing that we've got to get right, the thing that's going to move us furthest, the thing that is going to change this state, the good news is we have had two very good governors in a row who worked hard on this issue, who were not satisfied with the status quo, and they moved the dial. And we need to continue keeping this issue a priority, the highest priority, whether it's pre-K, whether it's after-school programs, whether it's getting the drive to 55, more people graduating from college. We need to stick with education and acknowledge that what Governor Bredesen and Governor Haslam have done and keep moving forward and moving forward strongly. The second thing is jobs. You know, Tennessee has got a lot going for us right now. Our economy is strong. It's not as strong as we'd like it to be every part of the state, and there's work to be done there. But basically, we have a state that is known for its fiscal integrity, its fiscal strength, and for being prudently managed. And we need to continue to do that. That is the key. And we are known for being a low tax state. That is important, and we need to continue to do that. We need to make sure that we are devoting our economic development energies to help those who need the help. We ought to be doing more in West Tennessee. We ought to be doing more in Memphis. We ought to be doing more in any community that is suffering. And then on the issue of health care. You know, I think there's sort of some good news here, and the good news is, number one, I think everybody realizes, whether they want to say it or not, that the Medicaid expansion vote was a huge mistake. That was an example of voting by ideology. That was an example by voting on party lines. And our state was hurt. Could you imagine if we turned down $3.5 billion or $4 billion for transportation costs? People would be going crazy. But we turned down money that would allow people with low incomes, with disabilities, with pre-existing conditions to go to the hospital, to go seek medical care. And now we've had 10 hospitals close. So the good news is we can't wait for Washington to come to the rescue. We need to work as Tennesseans to find these answers and to make sure that we're taking care of our citizens. Thank you.
All right, that is it. I want to thank all the candidates for being here. Thank you all for joining us. Thank everyone who watched online, and thank you to the Nashville Public Library.